you can follow the DIVINFOOD Project. I put the webpage address here on the bottom of the slide to read more about our EU project. Yes, so here we see the program for today. So we will do the first 3 presentations in a row. So we will have our first 3 speakers are part of the DIVINFOOD Project. And they are also active in some of our living labs working with lupins. So we will do the first 3 in a row, and we will have 15 minutes for questions. Katrine, my colleague, will be moderating your questions, so please write them in the comment chat. And then we will go on after the first Q&A with the last presentation from Inveya Foods. And after this, someone needs to close the microphone, please. After this presentation, we will have the final Q&A, 20 minutes. And of course, you're welcome to also write your questions in the chat here. And Katrine will make sure to gather all the questions for the speakers. And if you have any comments or thoughts, please write them in the comment chat. So, and then I will just wrap up in the end, I will wrap up and tell you what's next in the DIVINFOOD Project and the community in practice. So, Flavio, you just need to take off your microphone, please. Okay, so sorry for the quite hectic start here. I think we will just jump into the first presentation already, because yeah. So we will have the first speaker is Teresa Lázaro, and good morning, Teresa, and you have your presentation ready for us?
Yes.
Okay.
So as you are, I assume, a host, you might be able also to mute some of the participants.
I will.
In case it happens during the presentation, and I'll try to.
So I will just mention, Teresa, that you are from the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture. So a very warm welcome to you, and please take the stage whenever you are ready.
Yes, I hope you can see my screen and also hear me properly. If there is any problem with the audio or the video during the presentation, just feel free to stop me. I will give a very short interview or introduction to the lupin crops, and a couple of highlights on how much consumers know the lupins as food in the target countries in which we are working with this crop in the DIVINFOOD Project. So to say, lupins, to take it a bit from far, it is a genus of legume crops with about 600 different species. And I say that just to show that this is a genus of species which is really widespread across various climatic zones. So it is really a strong point of the lupins that they can adapt to different environments. And you can see here from where the different lupin species are native and how far they also got introduced and in some cases cultivated. The lupins we are more working with in agriculture, they are annual herbaceous species, but they also exist perennial species. And even though it might look a bit strange for the ones who mostly work with the cultivated lupins, there is even shrubs and trees of lupins. So this in the picture here, it's a Lupinus arboreus, a lupin tree with very beautiful yellow flowers. I won't go one by one in the 600 species, don't worry. I know that today it's rather about the food processing. So I'll just go through very few ones which are most important for us for the for agriculture. So I hope you can also see my cursor on the screen. There are some, at least a couple of perennial species which are very known, and it's important to know the difference from the ones we use for grain production. So the Lupinus polyphyllus and this Lupinus nutkaniensis, those are perennial, and both of so the Lupinus polyphyllus is surely used for gardens, but it's also mentioned and classified as an invasive species in several European countries. And the Nutka lupin, it's really invasive and even neophyte, for example, in Iceland. And many people, when first get acquainted with the lupins, they rather know the very beautiful Russell's hybrids, which are basically the garden lupins. Those are perennial, and all of these, they have a very high content of poisonous alkaloids. The good news is that they have a different number of chromosomes compared to the cultivated lupins, so there is no problem of crossings between the cultivated and the ones which are used more for ornamental reasons. Going back to the annual arable cultivated ones, there are 4 main species. The Andean lupin, which is the one mostly cultivated in South America, and then the 3 which are the most important in Europe, because they are also the ones domesticated and most cultivated in Europe. It's the Lupinus albus, white lupin or broad-leafed lupin, the Lupinus angustifolius, so also called the narrow-leafed lupin, and the yellow lupin. The yellow lupin is mostly cultivated in very sandy, very acidic soils, mostly in Poland. So the 2 main crops, also the ones we work with in our project, are the white and the narrow-leafed lupin. So here are a few pictures about the 2 crops to have an impression. This is narrow-leafed lupin, so it's also called namely blue lupin, but there are blue lupin with white flowers. So the narrow-leafed, it's because if you look at the leaf here, the leaflet is really narrow compared to, let me go to the next slide. This is the white or broadleaf lupin. You can really see this is really the trait to separate the 2 crops, unlike the flower, because also white lupin can have blue flowers. The next, you can see how they look in different stages, from the flowering stage to the pod stage. And the other very relevant trait, which is actually very relevant for food processing, it's the seed. The seed of blue lupin are quite small and roundish, and they can be from very whitish to have very dark color, while the seeds of white lupin, they are flat and big, and they do not have there is no variety with the dark seeds of the cultivated ones. Yes, in general, lupin is really an interesting crop from the perspective of the cultivation, obviously because it's a legume crop for the nitrogen fixation, also because of the phosphorus mobilization, especially in white lupin, where the roots do this special type of roots, which are called the cluster roots, which can help to mobilize the phosphorus in phosphorus deficient soils. They have a very deep roots, so they really help with the improvement of the structure of the soil. And for the central and North European growing condition, as these are from Mediterranean region, the white lupin, here in this picture you see white lupin. It is interesting because it's cultivated as a spring crop, but it's a rather cold tolerant spring crop, much more, it can be sown much earlier compared to soybean, and it is also drought tolerant from flowering on. So this is for all these reasons, the lupins are really an interesting crop, especially for organic and agroecological farming systems. I would like to shortly mention what we do related to the research in the institute where I work at FIBOL. We are in the group of plant breeding, and our main target is to develop new varieties of white lupin. So from the crossings to the selection, our breeding targets is increased resistance to anthracnose, low alkaloid content, and early ripening. The reason is because in Swiss conditions, there is only 2 varieties with increased tolerance to anthracnose. So it's very little choice for the farmers. And there is basically at the moment no white lupin variety on the market with a stable, low alkaloid content. Allow me to go back to the 2 main crops to say a couple of informations about, let's say, strengths and weaknesses. So narrow-leafed lupin, a strength of this crop is that there is varieties with very good resistance against anthracnose, which is one of the major diseases of lupins. Another strength is that thanks to variety development, there are on the market already varieties with a quite stable low alkaloid content. Unlike in white lupin, where we have very few varieties resistant to anthracnose, and the commercial varieties, there are sweet commercial varieties, but the variability across seasons and years sometimes makes it that then the seed lots from actual production are above the threshold. What are on the other side the positive aspects of white lupin? Surely the yield potential. The yield potential of white lupin is higher than the one of blue lupins. The weed competition, the white lupin is a much more vigorous plant compared to the blue lupin. So in organic farming, it's easier to manage the weeds. And as well, blue lupin are more sensible to calcareous soils, so it's difficult to grow them when there is too much free limestone. This is in general for lupins, but put it on the scale. The yellow lupin is the most sensible, so really needs very acidic soil and no free limestone in the soil. The blue lupin is in the middle, and the white lupin, there are varieties which are more let's say, less sensible to the calcareous soil. So it's the one which can be better integrated in areas where there is a bit higher pH in the soil. Very well. The approach that we are trying to use in the living lab of DIVINFOOD is that us researchers who try to develop new varieties for this crop gather and exchange together with the farmers associations, the networks which promote proteins, alternative proteins in our country, and with collection centers, processors, in order to develop together the value chain for this crop. So that obviously, if we are going to be successful, as we hope, to put on the market new varieties that can support the farmers to increase the acreage of cultivation of this crop, there is also a market for the usage of the grain of this crop. So, to go back to the actual question I was supposed to answer in this first presentation, how much are the lupin known among consumers? I can say from actual consumer studies, how this is going at the moment in Switzerland and Denmark. On the screen, you see the result of consumer research which was conducted in 2022 on a sample of 500 interviewees in Switzerland. And here you basically see that only down here, the lupins, only 28% of the respondents have actually consumed the lupins. And you can see how different this is compared to chickpeas, to lentils, or to beans, where everybody basically has eaten this other type of grain legumes. This now is consumer research, which was conducted in Denmark, also in 2022. In this case, the interviewees were more than 1,000, and the message is basically the same. Whether if Danish people have surely, or most of them have tasted or eaten chickpea or lentils, this is much less when it's about lupins. So yes, the crop is still little known among consumers, but that's also why it is an underutilized crop. And we hope that with the activities of our living labs in these countries and also in Italy, we can improve this situation. Thank you very much. I think this would be enough for the moment.
Thank you very much, Teresa. That was very interesting. So we will just continue with the next speaker, and let me introduce Luca Colombo from the Italian Foundation for Research in Organic and Biodynamic Agriculture. So Luca, are you ready to share your screen with us?
Yes, hopefully.
And remember that you can ask your questions for these three speakers in the chat, and we will do a question round after the third presentation. Thank you.
Okay, can you just please confirm that you see my screen?
I see your screen. Yes, perfect. We see your screen. You just need to, do the, yes, perfect.
Yeah, here we go.
Good.
So good morning, everybody. I'm presenting a bit of barriers and opportunities arising from lupin cultivation and use as processed food. And I'm doing that on behalf of the Living Lab devoted to white lupin, which is being carried out in Italy and in Switzerland, so in close collaboration with FIRAB, as well as CREA in Italy. So that has already provided a quite useful and broad overview. I just want to also give a sort of historical perspective based on what used to be the situation a century ago, exactly a century ago. The image you see, I received that image with including the highlights in orange from a friend, from a journalist, who browsed the Merceology Encyclopedia, and where there was this little chapter on lupins, and the highlights in this chapter that lupins were cultivated quite substantially a century ago, harvesting up to 30,000 tons in Italy. It represented a very common food at that time. A century ago. And finally, there was an issue with toxic alkaloids, presumably in small amounts, as the encyclopedia says. So the point is that currently, we don't have very precise statistics in Italy, so the figure is a bit fuzzy, but we can estimate we just have few thousand tons. So as a sharp decrease in production. And it's no longer a common food. As Teresa already stressed, the situation in Switzerland, in Denmark, is very similar to Italy. So lupins, and white lupins in particular, are not a common food. But alkaloids is a persisting issue. So we still struggle to manage alkaloids and to provide a nutrition and safe food to consumers. So taking into account the barriers and the challenges we have, the anti-nutritional challenge is a clear one. So in consideration of alkaloids, we tend to consider a threshold of 200 milligrams per kilo as the reasonable threshold for safe consumption. And so, as Teresa already mentioned, we have several varieties that are above this threshold and require the bittering of the grain in order to introduce the white lupin into the consumption. And so we have two main, let's say, streams or processing for the bittering. One is the traditional bittering. You see the image on top. It's rinsing the grains and boiling the grains, and then having storing the grain in salty water. This is the traditional one, which has a relatively important water and energy footprint. Or we can also have an industrial process. I'm far less familiar with, but this is also carried out by food industry who want to get rid of the bulk of the alkaloids. But then we also encountered another sort of, let's say, anti-nutritional or health issue in relation to white lupins, which is the inclusion of white lupins in the list of potential allergens. We had a few meetings with food companies, and they showed some reluctance to engage with white lupins because they can have cross-contaminations, and they want to avoid labeling of potential allergen implication for their non-lupin foods. So this is a clear issue. And apparently, according to the literature, these issues are more prevalent in Europe and in Australia, and far less in the Americas. And in the slide, you can see the lupin allergen card prepared by the health authority in Australia, where there is a list of potential foods that may provide allergies for people that are sensible to lupins. At the same time, this shows the potential we have in food processing, because we have a pretty long list of food products that we may consider when processing lupins. The point is how scared food industries or consumers might be in having potential exposure to allergies on lupins. So this is another barrier for development. Many food industries, I stress this point, we met tend to say, okay, it's a good protein source, it's a very nutritious food, but there is an allergenic potential, and we want to stay aside from it. So in any case, we have what I would consider a double momentum. We have a plant-based diets momentum. This is receiving an increasing interest in the scientific community, in the consumers, amongst consumers. Many associations are campaigning on plant-based diets, and policies are also looking at it. So this is a very relevant opportunity, including for lupins. And then we also have another momentum, which is the politics of protein, as was stated by IPES Food. So from a geopolitical perspective, proteins are becoming much debated. And so we have a window for opportunity to discuss the role of lupins as well as other green legumes in this respect. The point is, which direction should we take in valuing lupins in these and valuing the momentum for plant-based diets? We are aware that lupins are quite neglected in industrial recipes for the time being. So we need to make lupins more, let's say, sexy and more appreciated by the food industry community, which is much more familiar with other green legumes, peas, fava beans, chickpeas, soybean in particular. So lupins can be a very valuable ingredient in this respect. notably in consideration of the very high protein profile of lupins. But this raises an issue which is very relevant for the DIVINFOOD project, which is choosing a mild processing strategy to value neglected crops, which is what I called the Lego approach, which means dismantling and rebuilding nutrients in food products. So like protein extrusion to come up with novel foods, etc. So we tend to avoid this approach and we choose a milder processing approach. Said that, we are in Italy exploring different options for to value white lupins. As you can see in the slide, we have a sort of more artisanal pathway, particularly for bakery products. We made a tasting of bread or bakery products blended with lupin flour up to 20%. And it proved to be very much appreciated by consumers over this tasting. And also our CREA colleagues in Italy are exploring the dairy-like pathway of processing. So exploring yogurt-like or ricotta cheese-like or fermented beverages. So they are exploring these options using microorganisms that are used to be that are already adopted for dairy products, for cow milk, for instance. And so they are exploring the potential of these microorganisms to get lupin-based products. To come to a conclusion, we also see the potential of out-of-the-box ideas. This is an image that I got from students that are in a class that Sonia Massari, who is a researcher in the University of Pisa, she's doing a class on food design. And so she asked her students to come up with some ideas to process lupins in a different way and to market lupins in a different way. So a group of these students came up with a vending machine, and for these kind of lupin products like lupin hummus or smoothie or salad, and they also created a narrative label to let's say deploy the nutritional value of this white lupin. So these are hypotheses, of course, but these hypotheses also show the potential we have in promoting consumption of white lupins. But we also can stress that lupin hummus, for instance, already exists. I want to underline what I read just yesterday. Hummus can be a sort of peace unifying, federating food, particularly in a time of a war, because hummus is consumed by Jewish in Israel as well as by Islamic people in northeastern Mediterranean coast. So hummus can be like a peace message in a very critical moment in history, as well as the prickle lupins that are more traditional in consumption, for instance, in Italy, particularly in Rome, where I live. And finally, we also have non-market opportunities that I want to stress. This is a picture I took from a TV show where one of our Living Lab farmers was interviewed, and among the pictures showing the farm, there was a very nice one with lupins, conveying aesthetic values. So lupins can be very valuable also in terms of landscape. And in terms of unifying a community, for instance, in southern Tuscany, there's a community of food which is promoting initiatives around lupin, including selling a small pot of a young plant of lupins. And so I would love to say that orphan crops, as neglected crops are also mentioned, can find a family this way. So thank you.
Thank you, Luca. That was really cute with the orphaned lupin babies. So I hope, once again, I just wanted to remind you to write your questions for our speakers in the common chat. And thank you, Luca, for your presentation. We will rush on to our third speaker. We have Inger Bertelsen from the Innovation Center for Organic Farming here in Denmark. So Inger, I don't know if you are able to share your presentation with us.
Thank you very much. I'll try to share my presentation.
And a very warm welcome to you too.
Thank you. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, you just have to push the
to presentation mode.
Yes. Yes, it worked. Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having this opportunity to tell a little about the lupins. As mentioned, my name is Inger Bertelsen and I'm working in Denmark. And I'm also in the DIVINFOOD as Living Lab Coordinator for a living lab that is cross-border with Sweden, where one of the grain legumes that we're working on is the narrow-leaved lupin. I'm going to tell something about the nutritional values of the lupins and some of the experiences that we have on mild processing. And as Luca mentioned, the lupins seem sometimes to be the plant that do not want to be eaten, being both poisonous and allergic. Therefore, I think it's very important to stress there are very good reasons for us to work with the lupins and not only look at other grain legumes, which of course also could be interesting. Therefore, I have made this slide where you can see some of the different grain legumes that we can grow in different parts of Europe and the composition of protein, fat, starch, and fibers. And in the top, we have the soya bean, which is very well known, both for food and feed. And you can see the composition here is high in protein and high in fat. And in the bottom, you have well-known grain legumes like lentils and peas. They are lower in protein and very low in fat and high in starch. And the lupins is in between. And they are rather interesting. Of course, they because of the high protein content, but also because they have a higher content of fat and a very low content of starch, which means they have other values than most of the other grain legumes that we grow. At the same time, they have a very high content of fibers, which also make them sometimes more difficult to work with. For instance, to cook them, to be cooked when you work with the whole seeds and things like that. But the fibers are interesting. And because I think it's very important that we communicate these values, I've looked up also values on health by using lupins. And I found an article that was a review of different studies on health benefits on lupins. And I think this is really interesting. They have looked through a lot of different studies, and they have looked at studies including the whole lupin, lupin protein, and lupin fibers. And I think this is important in the context of us working in DIVINFOOD with mild processing. And it's also known from grains that when you work with grains, you have to have the entire seed of the cereal to get the health benefits. And in the study, and I have the link in the slide if you want to go and see it more yourself. In the study, they also looked at these three components for themselves. And I've listed the ones where we have more than 50% studies with a positive effect of lupins. And for the whole lupin, it was the glycemic control on blood pressure and satiety. For the protein, it was serum lipids and blood pressure, and for the fiber, it was serum lipids, body weight, blood pressure, and satiety. So there is really health benefits in the lupins, and I think it's really important to work with the lupins, not just as you know it from the South, where it's a snack, but actually getting it more into the food. So this is what I thought I would present on the health benefits. Then I should talk a little more about the mild processing. And actually in the north, we are working both in Denmark and in Sweden with very mild processing. And I have taken some pictures of some of the lupins that are in the market. You can see here we have the selling of whole lupins. In Sweden from Nordisk Råvarer, they are selling whole lupins of a narrow-leaved lupin, and in Denmark at Kravegården, they are selling whole lupins of white lupins of the variety FIRAB. In Sweden as well, they make dehulled lupins, which are very tasty and very easy to use in the kitchen. And Kravegården makes flour from their white lupins as well. So this is really a mild processing. And it's interesting for the consumers to see that they can use this. When we're doing this mild processing, of course, the alkaloid content is absolutely crucial. Because we do not have anything that removes the alkaloids. Therefore, we have made some trials in Denmark, testing different sweet varieties, both of narrow-leaved lupins and of white lupins. And as you can see, we have varieties like Iris and Regent of the narrow-leaved lupins that are very, very low in the alkaloid content, and also very stable in the alkaloid content. And that is, as Luca mentioned, very important that we also have this stable production. But even though some of the others are high in alkaloid, in these trials, you can also have them low. You can see FIRAB is here as well, and it's too high. But we have this farm growing them that have sufficient low alkaloid. So it's just so important when we're working with this mild processing and do not have any processing to remove the alkaloids. As Teresa mentioned, there is very little awareness of lupins as food in Denmark. Therefore, we made last year an attempt to not just make lupins more known, but a lot of different grain legumes more grown in the professional kitchens by sending out Danish grown grain legumes to the kitchens that they could test. We made tasting boxes for them. And we had this dehulled lupin, which was tested by the kitchen professionals, and it was a very, very nice quality, and the responses were very good. They are mild, good tasting, they have a good texture, they keep firm after cooking, and actually it's not possible to buy this product in Denmark as it is now. But there's actually been quite an interest that's asking, where can we buy it? Other experiences about the lupins is when you have the whole seed, it can be difficult to get them tender. And that's also in connection with the high content of fibers. Another experience is when they are more unstable in the content of alkaloids. We have the situation when you use them whole or dehulled, then you can have single bitter seeds that actually make the experience of eating it bad. And therefore, if you're in that case, make it for flour instead, it can help because then you get the seeds mixed up. Of course, we need to look and are looking into the processing of removal of alkaloids, also in the kitchens, how to soak and cook lupins the best way. And then, as Lucas also mentioned, we have the same problems with processors that will not work with lupins due to the allergens. And in fact, even though we grow quite a lot of lupins in Denmark for food, there is no possibility to get it processed in Denmark. But in Sweden, there's a farmer who can process it. Then I have made this slide with examples of some of the products that are made based on mild processed lupins. And the first one is a fermented tempeh made by a Danish company. And you can see there, you can see the dehulled seeds are just used and very clear in the product. And this is made on Swedish lupins. And you can also see some different examples from Switzerland, this lupinat, and also pasta made of a mixture of spelt and lupins, and also yogurts made from it. So there's a lot of possibilities when you have the low content of alkaloids in the lupins. So that was my presentation. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Inger. That was also a very interesting presentation on the lupins. I can see some hands clapping also. I guess it's for all three of you. Katrine, do you see some questions in the chat that we should just ask our speakers?
Yes, there are some questions.
Perfect.
There's a question from Yuna, and it's for Teresa and Luca. So Yuna writes, thank you a lot for your presentation. Can you elaborate a bit on how processors deal with the alkaloid content to propose edible products? So I don't know, Teresa or Luca, if you can elaborate a bit on that. Is it possible through the processing? Yeah, Luca.
Yeah, thank you. So we are in a situation where we are exploring more this crucial aspect. For the time being, we are using different strategies to address that. We are trying to see what are the actual alkaloid content in the varieties in use. Generally speaking, they are quite high, so requiring the bittering, but there is a variety developed by CREA, which is supposedly quite low in alkaloid, and so it might be processed directly. But the point is that to see what are the technological conditions for the bittering for an industrial process, as already said, I'm not that familiar with that part. I'm more, let's say, familiar with the artisanal processing. Most of our living lab farmers do that themselves. And this is a bit annoying because it requires some time, some water, and some energy to do that. So, but at the same time, we are in a discussion with a food company in order to process white lupin, and so this will also be considered as part of the entire processing of lupin. So not only coming up with one or few products as an exploration condition to also explore the market appreciation of these novel foods, but also to see what are the technological barriers, including in terms of the bittering. So for the time being, I have no, let's say, precise answer on my side, but this will be quite addressed in the next months.
Thank you.
And
I
I
could
just
add, if we have, is it possible? I would. I mean, it's for the management of the alkaloid context, it has to be, you know, there is like a sort of different approach according to first what type of lupins we are speaking of. So if one is working with a landrace where there is a 2, 3, 4, 5%, up to 8% alkaloid content, it's a totally different story that if one is working with a modern variety which is low alkaloid, so it is the threshold is 0.02%, and this grain lot might be above threshold, but if it's even 10 times more, it's still a very different level compared to a landrace. So that is the first thing. So let's say to do water the bittering of a landrace with homemade dewatering, it takes 1 week. With a landrace, it's only take 48 hours. This is rough numbers. With Frida, which is a bit too high compared to the food threshold. The second thing is the type of product. So if one wants to do pasta or bread and you only use 10-15% over your mass, then you can have some lupin flour, which is above threshold in itself, but not anymore when you have made your bread. Or, for example, if you do coffee, for coffee it's extremely important as it's a water yes, it's basically the alkaloids are water soluble, so you can understand that coffee, when you roast the lupin for coffee, they must be very, very low, because anything that it's left, it goes in the coffee. So it's a very different attention that one has when it does a mixed bread and when it does coffee. And the other departing choice is if it's industrial or homemade, or let's say local processing, because obviously the how much energy one can use and time, it's also different. So these are, I would say, are the three starting points where to differentiate how to deal with the alkaloids.
Thank you, Teresa. There's a question that relates to that one. Is from Carlotta, who asks, does fermentation, dairy-like or tempe type, reduce the level of alkaloids?
There is a literature related to the possibility that some specific strains of certain species help. Once more, it depends from the starting point. So how big is this effect? At the moment in Switzerland, we have a small food company that does fermentates, like, I don't know, like soya, soya sauce style from sauces from other grain legumes. They are exactly trying this for lupins to see at how much they can stretch this effect. If this effect is strong enough according to the starting point of alkaloid level in the seed lot. So it's a yes, but it depends in which cases it's enough. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Janet, do we have time for 1 or 2 more questions?
Maybe a final question, and then we will move on to our next presentation.
Yes, okay. So this is a question from Sarah. What's the potential of lupin farming systems to support agrobiodiversity, example, insects or birds? And does lupin require a lot of pesticide application? So maybe Inger, I think you would be the right person to answer that one?
Well, I'm working with organics, so of course no pesticides. But actually, it's of interest for pollinators. I think it was Teresa also showing that there's no nectar, but as in other grain legumes, there's pollen of very high quality. So in that way, the growing of lupins do not demand a lot of pesticides. It's a rather healthy crop. In the case in Denmark, where there's very much restriction of the use of pesticides, actually a lot also the weed control and things like that is done almost in the same way as in the organic. I think wheat is actually a problem in the lupins. It's quite an open crop, but it's not. There can be some diseases, of course, where it's a benefit to use pesticides, but also there are variety differences, which means that you can choose more healthy varieties.
Okay. Just now that I have you, Inger, there's another question here also about, I think it was related to the field results that you showed. Does the environment have an effect on the differences in the alkaloid content of lupins?
I think both the environment, the location, and the year have something to do with it, but also the origin of the seeds. And that is what we're talking about, this alkaloid content not being stable, because all the lupins that we're working with are sweet lupins, which means that it should be low in alkaloids. But we can see, especially for the white lupins, there's a tendency to move to be more bitter. So I think that is one of the things we really have to be aware of, the alkaloids in the seeds that you sow.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions. I think we have more time after the final presentation, so please keep your questions for Katrin. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. Yes. So for the last speaker of this webinar, we have Katrin Blouet. I hope I pronounce it correctly, from Inveya Foods. And Inveya Foods is the biggest or one of the biggest lupin manufacturers in Europe. Maybe you can clear that out, Katrin, when you share your screen. So it will be very interesting to hear about Inveya's work on lupins in this aspect. So Katrin, a very warm welcome to you also.
Thank you very much.
Are you able to share your screen with us?
Yes, I will try.
Perfectly. I'm happy you got into the webinar. We had some troubles getting you in also. We managed in the end.
Sorry, I only have one working hand today, so I try to be quick, but tell me if it works.
It works. Yes.
Okay. So, of course, first of all, I would like to thank you, Jeanne, with the French pronunciation, for inviting me to this webinar. So, as you say, we are indeed an historical lupin processor in Europe, and we are the leading ingredient provider for lupin today. Sorry, I will manage it. So our business model is linked to the plant-based transition. That means that we are really convinced that plant-based protein and lupin will be at the heart of tomorrow's diet. We are a subsidiary of a big French cooperative group, which means that we have a fully integrated lupin chain within our business, but I will speak later about it. So just a few words, not to make too much advertising, but we have 3 production sites, 2 in France and 1 in the Netherlands. 1 in France, which is called Martigny-Ferchaud, and 1 in the Netherlands in Twello, are processing lupin. So in France, we are processing white lupin coming from the cooperative. And in the Netherlands, we are processing blue lupin, which, what we've heard earlier in the presentation, do not have the same nutritional profile. So we want to use both because of that. So we have 50 people working for us. We are equally working on the French market and internationally. We are also working mostly in Europe, but also a little bit in Northern America. And of course, we have the certification that we need to make food production. Okay. Maybe I will go fast on it up and to speak more about lupin. So just to put you a little bit in the history of lupin in Europe. So I think Luca spoke about that earlier, but lupin is an old crop that used to be well known in Europe before, and which was known by our grandparents. But after the World War II, there was a Marshall Plan, and let's say that the Americans wanted to export their soy. So there was, in the beginning of the 60s, a trade agreement which was made with no custom duty for soy, and a lot of soy arrived from America to Europe. And so the European country neglected a little bit other crop because they had what they wanted from the US. In 73, there was a big drought in US, and America decided to make a soy embargo, and then we were in trouble in Europe because we had nothing for the feed industry. So in 74, there was a first protein plan in France, and all the work that was done about lupin is coming from this first protein plan. So in the 80s, we began the research around lupin through INRAE. We made all the analyses in feed and in food application. And in 89, we created Lupingredient, which has now become Inveja. So just to indicate that the history of lupin is really intimate with the history of soy. So that we already discussed it, but there are 3 lupin which are accepted for the food: the white lupin and the blue lupin that Inveja is using, and the yellow lupin. For us in France, we made the choice to use the white lupin, which is the most adapted to our territories. So, and that are our territories. So we have a big area from Brittany to Poitou-Charentes where we can do the crop of lupin. And of course, this is possible because we have the good climate, which is a warm spring and warm summer, but without drought. And also the quality of the soil is free from active limestone and well drained. So that we already heard from other presentators today. What we call within the COP is that lupin is an expert crop. It's not something that you put in the field and you come back 8 months later to make the harvest. It's something that you have to look after, and also because there are not that much pesticide, you have really to take care of it and look at it very closely, I would say. What is important, and we already discussed it, it's important to promote lupin because lupin is a really, really small crop in Europe and worldwide. And it's also important to explain how to grow lupin. And that's why we are organizing within the cooperative sharing experience meeting from farmer to farmer. Regarding the process, that's a point that I will go quickly through. It's a simple process and respectful process. We first receive the seeds of lupin that we clean, so to withdraw stone, foreign body, and green lupin and so on. We make a heat treatment. We dehull the lupin. we crush and grind it, and we process it either into flour or into grits, make the packaging, and of course the controlling. It's important to say that it's only mechanical process. Again, if you compare with soy has a lot of different ingredients, but not all of them are obtained through mechanical processes. There are sometimes chemical processes. Of course, lupin is the champion of nutrition. We see that there is an interesting amount of protein and a good amount of fiber, which help us to improve the density of the food. So it's really a good ally for the food recipe. It helps us to enrich in protein and in fiber, and it is widely used in gluten-free products. What is interesting are the functionalities which are behind the use of lupin. Lupin shows good emulsifying properties. It's rich in protein and in micronutrients, rich in fiber. It has a golden yellow color. It helps to make water retention. It enables to substitute butter, hazelnut, and egg. So again, to improve the nutrition, and it also helps to prolong the shelf life of product. For example, for brioche, for bread, and product like that. So it's really a good product for the food industry. And the best way to show it is to show you where lupin is used. So you see there some gluten-free products. Major gluten-free producers are using lupin either to replace soy, which was widely used, or for specific functionality. There you see bread product and also a cereal product. Luca said earlier that the good advantage of lupin is that it is widely used. You can find it in bread and bakery product. So, for example, in the waffle product that you see in the middle, adding lupin in the recipe helps the industrial to withdraw the waffle from the iron of waffle. So it is really a technical use of lupin. You see on the bread product on the left part that it enables to enrich in protein. For the muffin, it will bring the yellow color. So it's really a diversified application. Then you have all the savory products. So I tried to pick up some different examples. From the left, so you have something to put on the bread from tomato and lupin. The product after, it's a cheese product. And what is useful here with the lupin, you had the lupin in the batter mix. So the batter mix is what is going between the middle and the cracking on the top, and it helps the product to keep, let's say, unified and not to crumble away. Then a very trendy product at the present time for lupin, but also for all pulses, it's pasta. So all around Europe, there are a lot of pasta containing pulses that are launched in the last months. So it's really a great trend. And the last one is a sauce with lupin, and you see that they are communicating on protein content. Then we go to sweet savory. So in that case, we have a chocolate pasta, which is made with a good proportion of lupin flour, and on the left side, vegan granolas. Also, a new trend is the milk replacement. You see there are 3 examples. So from the left, a yogurt made with lupin protein, and then a raclette vegan cheese, and after that, cheese to be grilled on the barbecue. So it's quite innovative, and it's also, as Luca said earlier, we are in the right momentum to develop product with lupin, because we are trying to improve our consumption of plant-based protein. Then more difficult, you have the egg replacement. So from the history, lupin is well known to replace the yellow part of the egg, so with the emulsifying property. And now there are a lot of products emerging where lupin is 100% replacing egg. So that there is the liquid egg on the right side that you just can pan as an omelette. So it's really a brand new product. We spoke about it, but it's important to say that there are a lot of clinical studies that have been carried in the last 20 years around lupin, showing that lupin can have good result on our health. For example, on blood pressure, on the treatment of diabetes, reduction of cholesterol, and satiety. But today there is no claim which has been accepted by Europe, which means that we let a lot of other novel food coming on the market, but lupin does not, which is really a pity, and which is also the consequence of a lack of recognition that we have on lupin. And I would say the same about allergenicity. So lupin has been added to the list of major allergens in 2006. And this was due to a clinical study that was made on 23 patients. So it has been clearly a kind of lobbying from the soy industry, which is also a pity. But I would say for us as an industrial, it's okay, because we all know that lupin is an allergen. But it's the case for all plant-based protein. So yeah, the idea would be maybe to say that in the future, all plant protein should be on the allergen list, to be sure that we are using each of them for their property, for their nutritional advantages, and to simplify everything for the industrial who are making food. Because today it's I have the feeling that people are choosing, for example, pea, which is not in the allergen list, because it's not on the allergen list and not specifically for their property. So I think that's something that could be carried to the Europe, to say, okay, we know that all protein are allergenic, so why should we not add everything, make a pulses allergen, and start to work, I would say, with all pulses, depending on the final application. I wanted to make a small conclusion, because I'm the last to come. So I wanted to stress on different points. For the bad and the good, lupin and soy history are intimately linked. But soy is more known than lupin, so there is a big job to be done on the recognition of lupin in Europe, but also worldwide. You see there are not much player today for lupin, and of course when we are a few, we have no, let's say, no time, no money, no contact to make lobbying. So lobbying in Europe is a major point. Allergenicity is an issue to enter new customer, but as I said, maybe it should be the problem of all pulses and not only the problem of lupin. There are also processing difficulties because of the low level of fat in the lupin. the extraction and the protein concentration is either difficult or very expensive, which make it impossible to buy for the consumer. The question of alkaloid is also important. The analysis of alkaloid have been improved in the last years, and the laboratories are analyzing more and more alkaloid, which make it difficult to be under the 200 ppm. So that's something to be careful about. And I think that's all I wanted to say. So for me, the key points are lobbying, using lupin for its own quality and properties, and not depending on the fact it is or it is not an allergen, and trying to see how we can find new processes to offer new ingredients which would be nutritious, sustainable, and which contribute to the protein autonomy of Europe. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Katrine. That was quite interesting. I saw some comments or questions coming in the chat. So I don't know, Katrine, if you kept track on them, or I don't know. Whoops! I'll just closing your screen, Katrine.
There are two questions here, and then I know that you, Shanna, you would also like a few minutes in the end just to wrap up.
Yes, that would be nice.
Okay, so Catherine, there's a question here from Alessandro. Do you only use heat treatment to debitter, that is, reduce alkaloids?
No, it's not used to debitter. It's really used as part of our processing. So it's we are only using sweet lupin. That means all the lupin that is entering our production is below 200 ppm, and we have no need to debitter lupin after entering our processing.
Okay. There's a question related to that from Paolo. Could you provide more details about the heat treatment?
So of course it's part of our processing, so quite secret, I would say. But to make a good heat treatment of lupin is playing on two parameters: is temperature and the length during the time during which we are heat treating the product. We have different parameters. We can either do low heat treated lupin flour or toasted lupin flour. But of course, I will not give the details about the temperature because it's the critical point of the processing.
Okay, super. I think we'll just take the last question here. It's from Sven Erik, and he asks, what is the future for decreasing allergens, and is it the same problems for all pulses?
Yeah, for me, as I say, all the protein and the plant protein have an allergenic profile. Of course, there are studies which have been made to decrease allergen in product, but again, it's expensive. It's difficult, so it's quite difficult to make. Let's say a decreasing allergenicity process match with the need that we have to be sustainable. That means to use less energy, to use so yes, it's a question, but I think that today there is no sustainable way to decrease allergen in protein. Maybe, but I'm not an expert in that. There would be a possibility in the breeding of the seeds to see if we can find new variety and work more upfront on the variety than during the process.
Thank you very much, Katrine. Shanna, will you wrap up the webinar?
I will wrap up the webinar. I just have to share my screen. Let me just see if I can put it here. Okay, yes. So for this, before we end this webinar, I just wanted to quickly address what is happening in the future in our DIVINFOOD community in practice. And I will also send you an email with all these informations after the webinar, so you don't have to remember it all by head. So for 2024, next year, we will continue with the 2 yearly webinars. We didn't fix the dates or the subjects quite yet. We have some ideas, but if you have any ideas on subjects in relation to mild processing of legumes or cereals, you're very welcome to send me an email with your suggestions and we will take them into account. I've put my email here on the slide, so you can always find me here. And then I have to say that if you are interested in following our DIVINFOOD project in the future more closely, we have our stakeholder platform where you will be able to receive project outcomes and news from the project. If you want to take part in that, you can also send me an email and I will add you to the list. So another thing I would like to share with you is we had a request if we could open a LinkedIn forum for people working on lupins. Because as you know, it's quite new working with lupins and it would be nice to kind of join some of the people or a lot of people hopefully that are working with lupins in Europe and create a forum for sharing ideas, knowledge, inspiration, dilemmas and such as we discussed today with each other. So I already opened up a LinkedIn group. You can hopefully find it via this link. I will, also send it to you. I don't know why it just changed. Here it was. I will also send the link in the email I'm going to be sending you after the webinar. So yeah, the idea is just to share any knowledge or ask for something if you have further questions or some new innovations would be nice. I'm going to look in the group and if I have some interesting stuff, I'm going to share it. I'm not going to to do a lot in there. It's up to the participants to kind of shape how they want to use the forum. You could also share if you have some meetings or webinars, etc., and you want to invite people interested in lupins. It's kind of just open and dynamic as the our community in practice. So you're more than welcome to join, and I'll send you the link also in the email that I will send you after this webinar. And hopefully we will be able to share also the recording, the video from the webinar today with you. Hopefully Katrine had to press record because we had a rough start today. So if her computer wants us to save it, then we will share the video with you. So yes, I think it's only left to say we have actually 15 minutes left, so I'm happy we didn't run out of time either way, but thank you very much for participating in this webinar. I hope that I will see many of you next year in a webinar on possibly some other topics. I have put our, why is it doing this? I have put our contacts. Yeah. I don't know why. Okay, I will put Katrina and I's contacts also in the email. So feel free to reach out, ask questions, send us ideas. Just thank you again. Sorry for the rough start, and have a really nice day.